Welcome to the Weights and Plates podcast. My name is Robert Santana. I am your host, along with Trent Jones, my co-host.
Hello, gentlemen and gentlewomen. Why don't we say gentlewomen, by the way?
Why don't we say gentlewomen? Well, that's, that's sexist or something.
Is it?
Not all women are gentle. I don't know.
Are you telling me that women can't be gentle?
Depends on which state you go to these days, You might get
they
a
all
different
have
response.
to be working class.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had to look that one up in the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, the other day. It is, in fact, a word. It does, just like gentleman denotes a person who does not have to work for a living. A gentlewoman would be a female who does not have to work for a living, part of the aristocracy. But for whatever reason, it's fallen out of favor, and we don't say gentlewomen. We just say lady. I don't know, man. English is weird. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we thought we'd talk a little bit more about that dirty word, maintenance. And, probably maintenance is not really the right word to call what we're going to talk about today. But I had some thoughts from some of my training, my own personal training I've been doing recently, about how you can get some semblance of progress in your training program when you're not actively trying to put weight on the bar. And maybe I should say you're always trying to put weight on the bar, but you can't always do that in a linear fashion. Like, you can't always do that on a planned way. We talked about that before. Like, you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to set myself up with a 2 or 3 week cycle, and I'm going to PR on this lift every 2 or 3 weeks, or whatever your interval is. But, sometimes you have these phases of training or phases of life where things are busy, like the holidays where we're at right now. And you just don't have a lot of time and effort and focus to put into your training. That doesn't mean that you just lay down, or you just kind of throw it away, or don't try to add. There are some tricks and some things you can do in these seasons to stimulate progress. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at these days.
That's been like my whole year.
Yeah, that's been me since I opened the gym 3 years ago almost. You're always trying to add. We've went through this before, how maintenance is a myth. You're always trying to add. But one of the first things that I did when I, decided that there were other things that were more important than, time in the weight room, was I just prioritized what's most important, which are our 5 main lifts, right? Squat, press, deadlift, bench press, pull downs or pull-ups, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's chin-ups. And I would just do 2 exercises at a time, and pretty much been on a 3-day split ever since. At one point, I was on a 2-day split. I'd squat and bench one day and deadlift and press one day.
Yeah, so you hit all the lifts once per week. Okay,
And I'd superset them because I wanted to be out in 40 minutes. And I would just add to them until, it would either collapse because I wasn't recovered enough, or until I hit a PR. Most of the time it was the latter somehow. I've had a pretty good 2-year run, but, I did get hit a couple times with shit where I had to reset everything. But that's pretty much how I've handled it. And, you minimize. If the first thing you do is you reduce the amount of shit you're doing in the weight room, and, set yourself up with a 2-lift workout. I've had a guy, he's not necessarily on maintenance, he's building, but he is busy. He's a business owner, so he's been doing 2 workouts, 3 days a week for about a year now, and he's still making progress. So, it does work. The problem I see with a lot of people that try to do that for maintenance is that they, will not show up for 2 weeks. That's a problem.
Yes. Yeah, that compliance thing. Yeah, it's kind of funny. The longer that I train people, the more that I see that if you are consistent, as long as you have some sort of progression built into your program, you're going to hit some PRs long term. And it's interesting, we have this model of programming that says that we need a certain amount of stress and a sufficient amount of recovery from that stress, and that drives adaptation. Mm-hmm. And that when you stop adapting, that's an indicator that you need more stress in the equation to drive further adaptation, right? And this is what happens when we get from the novice phase into the intermediate phase, right? And so the intermediate phase often includes periods of time where you're doing more volume in your lifts than you were previously. And the reason for that is you're trying to accumulate more stress to drive more adaptation. But that's not what we're talking about, right? You're not adding a whole lot more volume or
you're
any more
exercising
volume.
at this point.
Right. But somehow, sometimes you can actually make progress. But I do think there are some principles here that we can kind of tease out, like what the heck we're talking about. But this is a phenomenon I have noticed in my own training. I've noticed it with some other people that I've coached, that for the intermediate athletes, I'm not talking about novices. This does not apply. If you have not gone through novice LP and probably at least the early intermediate stages of training, this does not apply. But if you've gone through that, there are periods of time where you can kind of go to these very stripped down programs and actually make a little bit of progress. It's going to be slow, but as long as you're compliant and you actually do the workouts you tell yourself you're going to do, then you can make some gains. So yeah, I want you to talk about, before I get into it, talk about some more about what you've been doing, right? So you've been lifting one lift per week, essentially, right? So one squat, one press, one bench, one deadlift, and then some chin-ups. So how do you program your reps for that?
Well, typically, I'll start a program. I mean, I've gotten more ambitious now, so I'll squat 4 sets of 5. But for a long time, I was doing 3 sets of 5, pretty much everything, and 1 set of 5 on the deadlift. And, I might alternate that with a rack pull, kind of like an early intermediate would. And because I was accidentally making progress, I had to start modifying some things. And I had to start doing, 3 sets of 5 pulls, every third week, because the rack pulls would go from 5 to 0,
Okay, so basically you'd be deadlifting one week, rack pulling the next week, deadlifting, rack pulling, and then as your rack pulls started to go from a set of 5 to a 3, would you do more sets if that happened? Like if you could only do 3 reps, would you do a second set, or we just stick with the 3 reps and then keep trying to add weight?
Typically I start with 5s, then I go to triples, then I go to singles, then I reset it. And, I do variations of that. But that's me. I do this for a living. I'm a serious lifter. I'm really into it. Most people are not in that category,
Yeah.
So it may not look like that. Maybe on 5s forever, because you end up, showing up 2 days 1 week, 0 days for 2 weeks, and then you're back, to the beginning of your LP again. You're recycling variations of that. But the whole goal there is that you're squatting, you're pressing, you're bench pressing, you're doing your chin-ups, and you're doing your deadlifts, at least once a week for all those lifts, at the bare minimum. And, you should be able to hold on to a reasonable amount of strength with that. But ultimately, you're either going to end up getting stronger at some point, or you're going to end up getting weaker at some point. It just ends up going one way or another. You don't just, stay exactly the same the entire time. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah, I've kind of found that when you start training in this manner, basically you get to a point, you basically get to a plateau point like you're talking about, and then you've got to do something to stimulate further progress. But it's very slow. And probably if you're already training in this sort of maintenance way, probably there's going to be things in your life. Like the reason that you started training in this way is because you just had to put active focused training on the back burner while you got on with the rest of your life, right?
Exactly.
And so if you're in that phase of life already, there's probably going to be some things that knock you off your training for that week or 2 weeks or whatever, right? So you're going to have, like, kind of inherent in what we're talking about is the fact that you're probably going to have times where you have to step back in the weight and deload a little bit and build back up, because you get a big project comes in and there goes a week where you didn't really train, or maybe you only hit one workout or something.
No, that's right.
So that's part of it. It's like it's a wave, right? You go up, you come back down a little bit, you go up, you come back down a little bit, you go up, you come back down a little bit. But hopefully, if you look over several months, the weights have kind of gone up a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's right.
I think that's and I think that's great. I think that's key number one, is that you've got to simplify it, right? If you're coming off of a program where you've been doing a lot of variation and you've been doing a periodization where you've got days where you focus on accumulating lots of volume, or you've got light days, intensity days, whatever, you kind of have to simplify all that down and go back to the core lifts. And the reason for that is the same reason we prescribe that for novices. The core lifts are the ones that are going to hit the most muscle mass. So if you want the most bang for your buck in this maintenance phase, you need to be hitting the core lifts and not getting too distracted with accessory lifts.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You don't want to be doing a bunch of arm curls all the time unless, you like doing that. But at that point, you probably don't care because you're having trouble showing up. So showing up becomes the primary goal of the weight room. It's at this point, it's exercise. You're not training anymore. You're exercising, and you might accidentally start training for periods of time. That's been what I've noticed. And if you accidentally start training for a period of time, you're also going to accidentally get stronger, which is the nice part about it.
Right.
But you're not just going to sit there and do the exact same thing every single time and keep the exact same amount of muscle mass, the same amount of fat mass, and the same amount of strength. It just doesn't necessarily work that way. But you want to be functional. So, you want to get a squat in there, you want to get a deadlift in there. You want to get a bench press. You have a lot of people. It's kind of like these people at the gym that are on the treadmills all the time. They're not training to run a marathon, They're
right.
They're quote unquote getting a workout. This is very acceptable in modern day, and it's recommended too. I'd rather you run on the hamster wheel if you enjoy that than sit on your ass eating Cheetos all day. So
right.
We definitely want people to exercise rather than sit around. So the example I just gave, most of the people in the gym that are doing, quote unquote, doing cardio. These people at the gym, they're not going to train for an endurance sport on a treadmill. They're going to be on the track or on the terrain, whatever surface they're running on. You don't see marathoners on treadmills typically. Same with cyclists, etc. People at the gym, there's not cyclists sitting on the recumbent bikes. There's not, hardcore runners on the treadmill. It probably does happen, I'm not saying it's 100%, but typically, people that are doing that, they're doing it to quote unquote get a workout. So this argument extends to the weight room. If you're at that point where you can't train, that doesn't mean you don't squat, that you don't deadlift, that you don't bench press, that you don't press, that you don't do your chin-ups. You have to get the lifts in a few times a week because you're trying to maintain function, maintain those motor patterns, maintain that flexibility in those positions. Just like the person that's jogging on the treadmill at 4 to 6 miles per hour is just trying to maintain their cardiorespiratory fitness. Nobody really talks about that because the thing is, most people that exercise in the weight room are fucking around doing silly things,
Right.
And, they're squatting high with a dumbbell or a kettlebell or, sometimes a barbell or Smith machine. If they're even squatting, most of the guys in there are doing arm curls and, variations of the bench press and, cables and, trying to get a pump, which, is fine. It's better than doing nothing. They're stronger than the guys sitting around, obviously. But, they're not doing all the functional movements. So it goes back to prioritization. If you're just going to go in the gym, fuck around and go home, then, throw some weight on the bar, do some squats, and then leave. And then maybe the next time you can do some deadlifts.
Yeah.
I hike every day. I'm not trying to climb no mountain. I'm not trying to go into climbing or compete in trail running or anything like that. But I hike every day so that I can breathe, because when I got real sedentary and was just lifting, I couldn't breathe very well. So there was a need to do some endurance work. But once I get to that point where, I go up this mountain here down the street, it's all uphill. I think I hike a mile up. Once it hits a mile, I turn around. I'm not going to finish the whole thing because I only have an hour to do this,
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily trying to get up there faster either. I just, I try to make it hard and, sweat and, feel my heart rate go up. And, I'm basically exercising. I'm not keeping a log of anything. I'm just mileage, I want to get a mile in. I want to be done in under an hour. So, that's mostly exercise. I think I have gotten a little faster at it. So, just as a, kind of like you get a little stronger lifting weights, novice effect, same thing.
Yep.
But it's the same thing. I hike, but I'm not looking to compete in an endurance sport. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I rode my mountain bike. I rode it for, I think I did 7 miles, and I accomplished that in about an hour. But again, that's not even impressive, but it was just, I wanted to switch the stimulus because I was getting knee pain from going downhill too fast. So I recognized I'm going to have to hit my aerobic work using a variety of modes so that I don't beat up my joints,
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up So I think this is something that is important to maintain your. I'm just going to call this fitness because it's some blend of like endurance, respiratory efficiency, cardiovascular function, all that kind of stuff. But I think that one valid way to train when you're trying to maintain is to hit one of the big lifts, like you talked about, and then do some GPP work, right? General Physical Preparedness. And this can be a lot of different things. I mean, it's pretty much, it can be anything, right? Which is nice because you can keep it fun. You can mix it in with whatever is going to fit your lifestyle. Since we've already established you're probably very busy already. It can be a bike ride. It can be a hike. I've been doing a lot of the same, 2-3 times a week. We try to take our dogs out on a longer 3 or 4 mile hike around here. So it's great. But you could also do things like you could do if you have access to it, you could do a Tabata on the exercise bike, on the Echo bike or the assault bike, right? That's a 4-minute high intensity interval workout. Bam. You could do some sled pushes. You could do some rowers. You can do some body weight circuits, right? There's a million ways to slice and dice it, but the whole point here is that you're just getting some more activity in. It's not very intense, so you can do a lot of it throughout the week. And so, again, because you're not really doing focused training where the goal is where you have a specific adaptation you're trying to go for, like a strength adaptation. Because of that, you can do a lot, you can accumulate a lot of this stuff and maintain a basic fitness base along with your strength that I think is beneficial when you do get back to productive training, right? So if you're in the holidays and you're busy and you're in this maintenance mode, that's where I'm coming from right now. But maybe January or February, things are going to calm down a little bit and you can get back to some focused training. If you come into that if you roll into January or February and you have been working on your fitness with this GPP work, I think that you're going to have a much easier time transitioning back to a periodized model where you've got volume days and basically higher volume and higher frequency training days. Because that tends to be the stuff that just kills you, right? Is when you have to do 4x5s or 5x5s or more on a lift. But if you maintain some of that, your conditioning through the GPP work, it's easier to transition and go back to that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And
I think this is overlooked too by a lot of people who are predominantly focused on strength.
I think that I would absolutely agree. And I think part of it is, I think there's a lot of people that lift, like, I think of Rip as an example. Rip's pretty active outside of the gym. I mean, he sits in his office and writes, but he's a pretty active guy. He takes care of stuff around his house. He's on his feet all day, He doesn't just sit around like couch potato. And, but then he lifts, right? And he always says that, you're getting enough conditioning from your activity. Well, a lot of people are inactive, especially people that work jobs that require you to sit and type and, and read and, do office work, Yeah,
and especially nowadays, where a lot of people are working from home, you may not even get up and walk anywhere.
Exactly. That happened to me because I started doing a lot of online coaching. I go to the weight room 3 times a week to coach and hang out with people, so I'm a little bit more active those days. But it started to get hard to do easy stuff. I started getting winded, And
right.
That's what kind of sparked me to do is I couldn't finish a hike one day. And I used to be able to muscle through, random cardio stuff that I do because I was a little bit more active throughout the day. So, like I said, I've addressed that. And I think the big thing that I'm trying to hit here is that, I'm pretty reasonably conditioned now, but I'm not competitive. I can't compete in a sport. I'm not near the extremes. I tend to be naturally decent at aerobic activity. It's like I'm naturally decent at strength. I'm not awesome at either, but I can do either one. That's how it was. In swimming, I can do the 500, I can do the 50,
Yeah.
But my point is that the same argument applies to lifting. If you go in and squat and, do a bullshit workout, not even a training session, let's just call it a workout. You go in, you squat, you leave, you go and you squat and bench. You're probably going to still be stronger than the average couch potato,
Absolutely.
So, it's not futile to do that. You should, it's better than doing zero. I think that's the point we're trying to hammer home here. Just like when you do your quote unquote cardio, you feel conditioned enough to do most things. If you go in and do some lifting, yeah, you're not going to, be the strongest you can possibly be or, place in a powerlifting meet, but you're going to feel some of that strength in the shit that you do. You're going to be able to get up easier if you're older. You're going to be able to take things off shelves, put them back on shelves, move things, And when I was fucking around in the gym, not necessarily training, all that stuff I did carried over to doing other stuff, was stronger than a lot of my friends, Then when I did this, I got a lot stronger,
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so there's some other things you can do, though, to keep stimulating the strength gains. And I think this is something that is definitely more relevant to someone who is already strong. So someone like yourself, you've had several years of strength training under your belt. You can take advantage of this because you can move a good amount of weight in absolute terms.
Mm-hmm.
I think for people who cannot do this, what I'm about to say doesn't apply as well. And one of the things that I've found is helpful is using rep progression when I'm training in this mode, or I'm exercising in this mode, I should say.
Absolutely.
And that'd be, things like if I'm working the bench press, let's say, and I've been doing it this way where I'm hitting it once a week and I'm doing 3 sets of 5. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, we know it's not going to be very long before you run out of gas and you just cannot do any more weight.
Right.
Well, one thing I've had success doing is working up to that point. Let's say I get up to 250 for 3x5 and I can't go any further. Well, what I can do is I can drop down to somewhere between 80 to 90% of that and start working some 8s and basically progress my 8s up as far as I can and then drop back down to 5s and then drop to 3s and then go back to 8s and then back to 5s and back to 3s. And this is not quite periodization, right?
Yeah.
In the strict sense, right? Because we're not like undulating between like different bouts of like, here's sort of an accumulation phase and here's a expression of that strength in an intensity phase. Mm-hmm. It's really just using the novel stimulus of a different rep range, a rep range that's just different enough to stimulate, different adaptation to get a little bit of gain. And I found, man, you can do this pretty well. Here's the problem though. If you are bench pressing and you can only bench 165 for 3 sets of 5, I have not found that it's very helpful to go and do, 135 for 3 sets of 8. Mm-hmm. There is a crossover point for everyone where you kind of need to be able to move a decent amount of weight to create enough of a stimulus with those higher rep workouts. But it does work quite well, and I think that's especially true for upper body lifts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. With upper body lifts, frequency is one of those things the gym bros at LA Fitness figured out years ago. Hate to single out LA Fitness. This goes for any big box commercial gym. You can do arms and chest every day and recover. If you do it fucked up, you can, tear something. But upper body muscles tend to be smaller. The low back's not as involved in certain movements, like barbell curl or, cable curls or whatever dumb shit they do. But, you just don't have the long recovery time. That's why you can do abs every day. Forearms you can do twice a day, 7 days a week. So, just kind of work from there. But yeah, with upper body, if you bench once a week, it's not going to really do much. I've done well pressing once a week, but I'm benching 3 times a week. So I think there's a carryover there, and there's other muscles involved. But just in general, the smaller the muscle group, the shorter the recovery time. So yeah, no, you're not going to get very far with upper body, but you can do a squat every week, you can deadlift every week, and you should still do the upper body stuff, And
yeah.
It's something like chin-ups, if you can do them, you should probably keep a bar at your house. There's a lot of convenient options for that now,
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you mentioned is chin-ups. If you're doing that GPP work, right? So let's say you hit your squats and you do 3 sets of 5, right? And then you're like, I'm just going to pick something to do for GPP. Like I said, it could be anything, right? You could go hike, you could ride your bike, you could go swimming, whatever. Doesn't really matter that much. But one thing you can do if you want to if you want to kind of keep a little bit more focus on your upper body is you can use body weight circuits to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So I often will do like a simple circuit of 4 or 5 rounds for time, where you do, 10 to 20 wall balls or air squats, and then you do 10 to 20 push-ups, and then you do 5 to 10 chin-ups. And if you do 4 or 5 rounds, you've knocked out 25 chin-ups, and you've done, 100 push-ups.
Right.
And then that's a pretty decent amount of volume there that you're adding to that you're hitting your upper body with. That's kind of like, it's free, right? Because you're actually doing this to get for the conditioning effect, but it's sort of like an extra little bonus you get because you're keeping your upper body working.
So years ago, I did stupid bodybuilding shit when I was like 19, 20, and I burnt myself out. I don't know that I overtrained. It wasn't heavy enough, but I definitely burnt myself out mentally. Didn't want to go to the gym, and I wasn't performing well. I was definitely overreaching. I stopped going to the gym for, I don't know, a good portion of that year. This would have been 2005, I want to say. And, I know I needed to get back in because I valued the health benefits of this and still wanted to get bigger and stronger. So in order to get myself back in, I started doing push-ups, and there was a park across the street from my mom's house where I was staying that summer. Push-ups and pull-ups. That's it. The air squats, I think I was doing. And then that turned into me driving my ass to the gym, squatting and benching and doing my pull-ups. And then here I am today. I'm still, lifting. I don't think I've stopped since, 2006. So that's 15 years, So I had maybe 6-month break. So, I've been in the weight room for most of the last 19 years with that short break that I just mentioned. But I thought that I'd never want to go back is what happened. So I just started with the basic movements. I'm going to do some push-ups. I'm going to do some pull-ups. I think I did incline push-ups too. Got to hit upper chest, bro. I believe that bullshit. Yeah, no, just started with the move. These movements are the basic movements. So if you have to do them unweighted, just to move through the range of motion, then if that's where you got to start to feel like you did something psychologically, then start there. That's another important point. There's stuff you can do at home. It's not ideal, but it's something. Yeah. You can lift things up off the floor. You can put things on and off shelves. You can, hold something while you squat. Whatever you got to do to, practice the movements, just like when you go for walks or you go for a short jog or you go for a bike ride. All these things seem to be pretty socially acceptable and encouraged, but nobody's really encouraging the maintenance of these movements, these loaded movements, these loaded human movements, Yeah, sure, go ride a bike and go for a jog, and then people do it, people walk a marathon. You'll see all sorts of shit people will do on the aerobic side, but nobody's saying, hey, why don't you just, grab a suitcase over there, do some squats,
Yeah,
or,
right.
Or, put that box of cables up on a shelf in a closet, then take it back down.
Right.
Things like that. There's things you can do, but you have to maintain your strength one way or another, and these movements still need to be done.
Yeah, then I'll go one step further. This is especially true as you start to get older. Mm-hmm. I think you have to go through these phases of exercise, maintenance, whatever you want to call it. You have to go through some of these phases, and actually probably you need to build them into your training throughout the year to maintain your joint health. Mm-hmm. The joints, we should probably talk to our good buddy Double D, Diamond Darren Deaton about this.
We can get him in. Here he's in high demand.
Yeah, he's a tough guy to pin down, but he's talked about this on the 40 Fit Radio podcast, that the joint health is kind of it's kind of a continuum. If you do no lifting and you have no strength, then your joint health is probably going to suck, especially as you age. And doing these compound lifts and actually training and building strength does a lot to make your joints more resilient. It improves the secretion of synovial fluid, the way that it flows, the lubrication of the joint. It builds the structures around the joint, et cetera, et cetera. It makes your joints more resilient and function better. But there's a big but. We're talking to people on this podcast who love to lift. And if you lift long enough and you lift heavy enough, you can push yourself on the other side of the spectrum where your joint health actually starts to go down because of all the constant loading. I mean, you learn pretty quickly when you've seriously trained for 2, 3, 4, 5 years plus, that you can't just constantly hammer yourself with squats and deadlifts and benches and presses, right?
No, absolutely not.
There has to be these sort of fallow periods where you're letting your body just recover from the systemic loading. And so I think that, for most of us, for the vast majority of us, this is going to happen naturally, right? Our life will get busy enough that we cannot continue to train seriously all the time, 100% of the year. And so we're forced into this kind of just by by default. But that's actually probably a good thing, if you're a long-term lifter, to do this lighter, GPP work, because it allows you to keep the joint moving through that range of motion, like you talked about. It allows you to get all the benefits of moving the joint and lubricating the joint, but you're also getting some rest from the constant heavy loading. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty important if you want longevity.
I mean, there are things that you just have to do. You got to walk, because if you don't walk, you get slow. You need to get places. You get somewhere. You got to get to the fridge. You got to get to your front door, right? So you got to walk. You got to run, because what if somebody's chasing you one day, right? You don't need to run 26 fucking miles. If you have to run 26 miles, the fucker's going to stop and shoot you.
Our friend Scott Hambrick says, if you got to run more than a mile, you got to ask yourself, what are you running from?
That's a very good question. That's essentially what I'm trying to articulate here. You got to. I think you have to do HIIT. Sprints are important too. You might have to run very quickly. A car's coming at you. You got to react. So nobody's saying to be deconditioned. What we're saying is you cannot. I mean, we're talking about two different things here, but nobody's encouraging you to be deconditioned. When you hear people say that cardio is going to kill your gains, what they're trying to say, they lose context here, is that you cannot train for an endurance sport and train for a strength sport at the same time. But you can maintain your endurance or maintain a level of endurance and train for strength, just like you can maintain a level of strength and train for endurance. We talk about it all the time, why cyclists and runners and endurance athletes should train. But you cannot have both reach the extremes of their capabilities, right? You can't maximize your abilities in both and reach your genetic potential in both at the same time. That won't happen. The endurance will eat up the strength because you're doing more of it. So that's what that really means, but the context gets lost. But nobody wants you to sit on the couch eating Cheetos and just squat, press, deadlift, bench press, and do chin-ups and do nothing else. That's not, we don't want that. So, you need to do some running. It's probably good to do some bike riding if you can. It's probably good to do some walking, and it's good to do sprints. Sprints tend to carry over to this stuff, too. It's a similar stimulus in some ways. But it also prepares you for things out in the world that you might have to do. I had a lady once who had a bad knee, and squats pretty much fixed it. She can't do continuous running, in the sense of she can't sit on a treadmill for 30 minutes or run several miles. But, her PT gave her one piece of good advice. They tend to do that on occasion. He said, sometimes you got to run if a car's coming down the street, you got to run. You have to be able to know how to run. So she has to do some running. It bothers her knee somewhat, but she has to do some because it's a functional activity. You might have to run someday, right? You might have to lift something someday. So it's the same rule applies. You need to do your squats. You need to do your deadlifts, Eventually you're going to be old. Getting off the toilet ain't going to be so easy. I worked in nursing homes. You want to be able to get off the toilet when you're 80. Yep. You want to be able to pick things up. Something's on the shelf. You want to be able to take it down and not throw your shoulder out. So just like, you're going to go for a jog or ride your bike or rollerblade or do all those things that, they show on the TV commercials that are socially acceptable. You still got to put a bar on your back and squat or squat something. You still got to pick things up or deadlift something. You still got to put things over your head, take things down from over your head. You got to press, you got to chin up. It's the same thing as, get 10,000 steps a day, get 30 minutes of cardio a couple times a week. It's the same shit. Even if you're not trying to push your limits on it, these are your basic movements that you need to get in for your musculoskeletal health. That's all there is to it.
And I think, I see a lot of all or nothing thinking when it comes to the lifting world. It's like, some people, they fall into this phase where it's just not going to be realistic to train a 4-day split with the full complement of compound lifts and supplemental lifts and all that stuff. So they're like, well, if I can't lift, I won't do anything. Mm-hmm. because lifting is the most important thing. And right, and like it's funny when I put it like that, it sounds ridiculous. Like, oh, of course you can do something, but that's not what I see. I see a lot of people get caught up in sort of like, well, if it's not squat, press, deadlift, then I don't know what to do. But I'm running into a wall because I can't do it often enough right now to keep making gains. And so what do I do? Well, I mean, that's what we're telling you. It's like you can do this GPP stuff, and it's just a balance, right? It's just shifting the priority. I like the way you put that. Like everything's just prioritization at the end of the day.
Like
everything's prioritization.
You think that asshole in the bike lane that makes you slow down gives a fuck about whether he makes it to the Tour de France? No. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the bike lane like an asshole swerving into the driving lane.
Yeah.
He's just riding a bike because he likes riding a bike. He's not doing a very good job. He pisses us off. We all know guys like this. But I bet if you asked him, he's probably not a competitive cyclist. Those guys tend to stay out of your way, typically.
Yeah.
Now, when you're trying to hike up a mountain, then there's, that's a whole other story. But typically, the cyclists are good about the bike lanes, in my experience. The weekend warriors and recreational guys tend to cause problems, kind of going out.
Take up the whole lane. If you're gonna be just take up the whole lane.
Just get in front of the fucking
don't make
cars,
it ambiguous. Yeah. Just be right in the middle. Don't be off on the side. But even if you got one of those bike lanes that is like kind of basically the gutter of the road.
Yeah, then
if you ride in that, that's fine. But do not, under any circumstances, ride in the bike lane and then ignore the rules of traffic and then skirt over into the pedestrian crosswalk just so you can cross the street ahead of the cars.
Yeah.
No. If you're on the road, you follow the stop signs and the stoplights. That drives me insane.
Oh, I hate it.
You want to get run over, do that shit.
And the competitive cyclists don't do that shit.
Yeah, they follow the rules of the road. Yeah, if a car would stop, they stop. If a car would go, they go. So
that's my whole point. Yeah. That asshole that's pissing off Trent, he's not sitting there thinking, well, I can't really train for the Tour de France, so I'm just not going to ride my bike. No, he's just riding his bike because he wants to ride his fucking bike, Yeah. Or the joggers you see in the morning, they're not all marathoners. You see these people running in the morning going to work, but they're not thinking, well, because I have a job and 2 kids and house to take care of and all this other shit, I'm just not going to run because I can't get I can't get a competitive time, But for some reason, I can't squat 405, so there's no point in squatting. No, that is not. You're missing the point. I mean, I daydream about it. I'm like, man, I wish I could just put 225 on and squat that every time. Then I'm just like, no, shut the fuck up. You gotta try and do what you can do today. I would love.
Right, yeah, and it gets tough, like especially when you've achieved something and it's not there anymore. Just a couple weeks ago, after Thanksgiving, I like everyone should do. If you're a lifter, you probably should try to hit something heavy after Thanksgiving because it's one of the best lifting days in the year that you're going to get. Like you're just packed with food and you're bloated. And
you're actually going to eat enough even if you normally don't.
That's right. So I put on the bar and I was looking at my log and I'm like, oh man, I have squatted 405 every year, at least once for the past few years, right? And then I was looking at my log and I'm like, man, I have not squatted 405 this year. Like the heaviest I've squatted is 365 for a whole bunch of reasons. But I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, like it's got to be today. And I think the only thing I had squatted in, recently up to that point was like 350 maybe. So it's been a while before I had anything really, truly heavy on my back. But I loaded 405 up and I hit it.
Nice.
But, which is great. But, for me at this point, it's just one rep. That used to be a set of 3 or a set of 5. And it's not anymore. I'll get back there. Yeah, I have no doubt that I'll get back there. It's, I'm not freaking out about it, but at the same time, it does get discouraging. And so sometimes, I see this attitude in lifters where it's just kind of like, well, I pulled 525 once and now I can barely pull 450. I want to throw the towel in.
Yeah.
No. If the only way that you're really going to screw yourself up is if you just give in altogether. But I think, even more than that, if you work on this, GPP stuff and you keep your fitness well-rounded, even in times where you're not pushing gains to the extreme in any direction, then I think when you come back to being able to do some dedicated training, that you'll actually have a better base to build with, right? You'll be able to tolerate that training because you've maintained your joint health, You've gotten all the benefits from the GPP work that we've talked about. So I guess this episode is really just like, permission to exercise and maybe a little encouragement.
Yeah. We're basically just telling you that lifting, if you have barbells available, obviously it's ideal, is an activity of daily living. So you kind of want to add some overload stimulus to it. Just like, we want you to walk. That's the bare minimum. But, a little bit of running or hiking, up a incline is probably better than just walking. I think most people would agree with that. But, you don't got to run, 100 miles a week, just like you don't have to squat 525.
Yeah.
But you still got to squat. You still got to walk. You still got to jog. You still got to run. You still got to bike, or whatever, depending on where you live. The different modes of locomotion might be more appropriate. If you're in a mountainous area that, has a winter, you might want to ski too. These are functional daily activities, and lifting is one of them. So just because you can't perform at the top level that you're capable of doesn't mean you don't do it. You don't think that way when you go for a run or when you go for a walk in the park. Don't think that way when you lift. Do the 5 movements and do what you can, because you're at least keeping your muscles functional, you're maintaining those motor pathways, and you're preparing yourself for most shit. If you do these lifts, you could probably do most things out in the world. You don't have to have a massive surplus of strength to lift up a couch or, do basic things that you might run into. Take something out of your car like a lawnmower, you don't need to have a 600 deadlift to do that. But it helps to deadlift, 200, 300, 400 deadlift, probably good,
Yep.
You just kind of scale that to where you're at, But performing the lifts, just performing them, you're going to be better off than not performing them. It's as simple as that. Just like, if you're getting some level of conditioning in, you're better off than sitting on your ass, right? There's a hierarchy here. So we're giving you permission to treat this as exercise if you don't have time to train. You still got to do it, though.
Right. Yeah. You still got to be compliant. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like when I hear us talking about this, it's like no shit, man. Like what do we really need an episode about this? But this is not the experience that I've had talking to lifters and watching them as they try to navigate through busy times of their life. So I know it needs to be said. It needs to be said.
It does. Lifting's odd the way people perceive it, because it is perfectly acceptable to walk a marathon and place 902. But it is completely unacceptable to go into a powerlifting meet and, squat 135 or 95 or whatever, For some reason, there is this perception that there needs to be a top performance if you're lifting a weight, but you could, walk in last at a marathon and that's okay.
Yeah, right. And, by the way, if you haven't done a meet before, like nobody cares if you're lifting 135 or 735.
Nobody gives a fuck.
Right. And it's not that like nobody cares at all. Like everybody's excited to see everyone do something hard. Right. Like, people that are somebody who's struggling to lift 135, people will cheer just as loud as somebody who's, struggling to lock out 735. Mm-hmm. It's one of the great things about strength meets. They're a lot of fun for that reason.
Well, it's the one sport where your competitors will encourage you to perform well.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody just wants to see PRs. They don't care, what level. But, if you've done a strength meet before and you're not at the top of your game, it doesn't mean you can't. I've done meets where I go in and I'm like, I'm just there to hit a respectable number, but there's no PRs on the board for me. And, those meets can actually be kind of fun.
Yeah, same here. I like to go in and just see what's there, People do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I think we've hammered this pretty well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Closing thought, we are in the middle of December right now. The Christmas holiday is upon us. Mm-hmm. We have just gone through the Thanksgiving holiday. I think we said this a couple episodes ago, but just a reminder, Christmas, Thanksgiving, these are holidays. It's not really a season. I know they say that on all the Hallmark commercials, but it's not a season. They're holidays. And so, with your eating, I hope that you have followed our advice and you had a great Thanksgiving. You pigged out. You had great leftovers, blah, blah, blah. But now you should be back to some normal eating habits. Same thing when the Christmas rolls around. Enjoy yourself. have a good week, and then, when December 29th or whatever rolls around, when that Monday rolls around after Christmas, just go back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
Get back to eating like a normal person. And that way you're not having to lose, 15, 20 pounds to get back to where you were
Yeah.
at the end of the holidays.
Well put. I second that. There was a paper back years ago. It was a research paper that I actually believe to be true, because once I say it, you'll understand why. They looked at holiday eating patterns and how people gain weight post-holiday. And then they followed the same people over several years, and they never lose the weight after the holidays. So they just kept accumulating more and more weight. So they were trying to make an argument that these holiday seasons, or whatever you want to call them, were responsible for some of this weight gain.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably truth to that. You pig out every year, and then you just continue to eat that way afterwards, or, because it's usually not just one day for a lot of people. You don't think about it. You eat all the leftovers. It goes on for weeks. You pack on a few pounds, and you kind of hang on to them for a year, and then you do it again.
Right. So more or less these people eat at maintenance the whole year, and then they gain, 5 to 10 pounds, and they do it again, eating at maintenance, their new maintenance.
Yep. So 5 years, 50 pounds.
It's true. Yeah. I was kind of jesting when I said 15 to 20 pounds, but yeah, it's probably more like people gain 4 or 5 pounds, but they do it every year. Mm-hmm. And so 10 years go by and they're like, what happened?
Yep.
So yeah, so there you go. Just remind yourself that at least when the kitchen is concerned, it's one day or a couple days, not a whole season. All right. Tell us where we can find you on the social medias.
You can find me at weightsandplates.com or Instagram, _Robert_Santana, or weights _and _plates.
Excellent. Do you have any events coming up?
I'm going to try and get a training camp on the books for the spring.
Okay. Yeah.
See what Carter's up to. He wants to do it.
Excellent. So yeah, just as a reminder, your gym is a Starting Strength affiliate gym. So
that is.
You occasionally host some training camps, lifting camps, stuff like that. You can find those if you go to startingstrength.com and you look at the events section. You can see where all of the training camps are going on in your neck of the woods, and you can come find Robert there at his gym as well. I am at marmalade_cream. As always, you can also find me marmaladecream.com. We'll talk to y'all in a couple weeks.